Understanding ought to in English. Hello, dear learners. Today we're diving into the depths of the English language by focusing on modal verbs for obligation, specifically the expression ought to. Our main focus will be on understanding how ought to is used to give advice or recommendations. Let's embark on this linguistic journey together. Ought to is a modal verb used to express duty or moral obligation. But, did you know, we can also use it to give advice or recommendations? It's less forceful than must or have to, yet more insistent than should. It expresses the speaker's opinion that it would be a good idea for the listener to do something. Imagine your friend has an important exam tomorrow. You could advise, "You ought to study tonight." Here, ought to serves as a gentle suggestion, implying that studying tonight would be beneficial for your friend. When giving advice, we often use ought to with the base form of a verb. It follows the structure subject plus ought to plus base verb. Example: you ought to take a break. It would be a good idea for you to take a break. We ought to consider other options. It would be wise for us to consider other options. Remember, while ought to can make your advice sound more polite and considerate, it can also sound slightly formal. In spoken English, should is more commonly used. Even when negated or in question form, ought to can still express advice or recommendation. In the negative form, we use ought not to, or more commonly, oughtn't to. For example, you oughtn't to skip meals. When forming a question, we use ought to at the start. For example, ought we to inform him about the meeting? While these forms are grammatically correct, they are less common in everyday conversation and are more often seen in formal writing or literature. Well, that's all about using ought to for giving advice or recommendations. It's a helpful phrase that adds a touch of formality and politeness to your speech. Remember, English is about communication first and foremost, so don't worry too much if you make mistakes along the way. As the saying goes, practice makes perfect. Thank you for joining us on this linguistic adventure. Keep practicing and you'll master the use of ought to in no time. Happy learning!